it's me, Stealthy from the Horror Network. Before this video fully begins, I just want to comment on the lack of videos lately. We have multiple videos in the works, but the guy who was supposed to finish his review stopped working for months, and he had issues with his computer, so we've been stuck on a hiatus of videos because of technical issues, school, life, etc. Anyways, let's get to the video. Outlast is kind of a topic that we've discussed once or twice on the Horror Network, and I will say that we will keep discussing it as long as, there's like more games, like such as Outlast Trials or Outlast 3, if they ever get made. So instead of doing a review, I wanted to do something different. So this video is pretty much inspired by Wow Such Gaming's Why You Wouldn't Survive videos, but the difference is Wow Such Gaming does mainly like zombie outbreaks or some sort of post-apocalyptic scenario. So here we will only focus on horror like Resident Evil, Outlast, just like stuff like that, And we will try not to make a copy of his videos. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Okay, so our topic is the game with the, Chris Walker who likes little pigs and all that. It's pretty much the game that pushed the genre forward, in my opinion, and I think it's actually one of the scariest games of all time. So our topic here is Why You Wouldn't Survive the Outlast Murkoff Experiments. Alright, so let's give a little background info on Outlast. So Outlast is a first-person survival horror game developed and self-published by Red Barrels. There are currently 3 games in the series: Outlast, Outlast 2, and The Outlast Trials, which is yet to be announced with a release date. So Outlast is very well known in the horror genre, as it's one of the scariest games of all time, and in my opinion, I think Outlast should get #1 on the scariest game of all time instead of like Amnesia or Five Nights at Freddy's. Anyways, so in Outlast, you are Miles Upshur, an independent journalist who has arrived at Mount Massive Asylum after receiving an anonymous email containing details about the horrible things going on at Mount Massive Asylum. Outlast 2 takes place in Templegate, a large village founded by Papa Noth and his cult followers. That village was another Murkoff experiment, but I'll go into details about that later. The Outlast Trials, not much is known, but according to the website, set in the era of the Cold War, human guinea pigs are involuntarily recruited by the good folks at the Murkoff Corporation to test advanced methods of brainwashing and mind control. In a world of distrust, fear, and violence, your morals will be challenged, your endurance tested, and your sanity crushed, all in the name of progress, science, and profit. Survive alongside friends, or dare to face the experiments by yourself. One of the writers also said that we'll get to see how Murkoff was in the earlier days, as Outlast Trials is a prequel. But note that Outlast Trials is not Outlast 3. So, as you know, the game takes place in a literal hell, an asylum owned by a corrupt corporation known as Murkoff. They have, for years, been using its patients for its infamous secret project known as Project Walrider. Some people have tried to expose the Murkoff Corporation, but as seen with a letter from Rick Traeger, who was another antagonist in the game, the man was committed and possibly became part of Project Walrider, which also happened to the DLC's protagonist Wayland Park as well. Murkoff conducts these horrific experiments for money and research. I'll play a clip of Dr. Wernicke explaining what they were doing.
Explain. I know. I am supposed to be dead. No such luck. I am older than sin, but somehow the only one left. Because of Billy. He takes care of me. He may think I'm his father. He certainly loves me, poor idiot. Do you know what the symbol represents? technology we have had for decades but never mastered. Murkoff discovered in my research a workaround. Turning the cells in the human body into nanofactories. It's the natural function of cells to produce molecules, but through psychosomatic direction, we engineered the precise molecules necessary. Mind over body. It was foolish and wrong to say we could control it. We use madmen to make something so strong.
So overall, these madmen were taken and forcefully subjected to these cruel and dangerous experiments. So fast forward through time, and the variants have escaped and are starting to wreak havoc in the asylum. So let's look at this from a patient's point of view. Like, let's say you yourself is a patient in Mount Massive Asylum. Your chances of surviving would be pretty much lower than anyone else's, as there are other patients that are violent and will do anything to kill you for pleasure or worse. Or maybe they would even do worse, like, mutilate your body or anything else, as seen by other patients in the asylum. And even then, the chances of you surviving the wall rider experiments are already severely low. The only way to honestly survive as a patient is to either be successfully transformed into the wall rider, or if you're somebody with like a huge amount of fortitude who can take on people like Frank Minera or Eddie Gluskin. So let's say that you survive the initial outbreak of variants and the wall rider escaping. Everywhere would be riddled with freaking violent people. Eddie Gluskin, the vocational block, the wall rider anywhere and possibly everywhere, and Chris Walker roaming the administration block and pretty much everywhere else in the game. And there's also the completely insane Rick Traeger, who is holed up in the mail ward. Your chances of surviving any of these areas are literally impossible, as the likely outcome is you finding yourself either getting your head torn off, your nuts sawed off, or your body eaten, or something even worse. So let's change the point of view. Let's say you're a security guard in this scenario. So you wouldn't have to worry about the experiments, but surviving heavily varies. Like if you're a standard guard stationed in the asylum, it pretty much depends where you are. In the game, you've seen dozens of guards either dead or killing other variants, or some who have like lost their sanity and just crawling up in corners, just hiding. As a guard, you would be able to defend yourself, but would you really be able to defend yourself from a Chris Walker type character or the Wall Rider? The answer is pretty much no. Any variant who sees you will definitely attack, but as I said, you have a better chance of fighting a variant one-on-one. Now, if you're one of the Murkoff tactical people, you have a pretty high chance of surviving, as you would be armed and all that. But the thing is, if you were to meet the Wall Rider, your chances of survival are pretty much impossible then, because as seen in the camera footage, that the Wall Rider is not at all stunned by bullets, and it was able to dispatch 3 Murkoff tactical people. So overall, if you were a guard, your chances of surviving the variant outbreak can be low or high. It depends on where you are. So let's talk about this from a more interesting point of view. Let's say you're a doctor at the asylum. Now, you would be safe from the experiments, since you would be the one conducting them. But let's fast forward to the outbreak of variants. You would be their number one target, because the variants, they hate the doctors because of what they did to them. So although doctors have number one priority of safety, but in this outbreak, it is pretty much every man for himself. It really depends as well where you are in the facility, because if you're in the secret lab, you're basically dead, because the Wall Rider is there, the variants are still there, and it's seen in Outlast Whistleblower that they just completely murdered the doctors and guards alike. So the variants in Wall Rider would just tear you apart and mutilate your body as an act of revenge. Although in the game there are a few doctors who you see escape or at least survive and leave the protagonist behind, it is likely that they were in the right place at the right time. I'm certain no doctor near the prison block, mail ward, or the secret lab actually survived the events of Mount Massive Asylum. So overall, if you're a doctor, you would never survive the events of Mount Massive Asylum because you would have a target on your back. Alright, so it's time to switch things up. As you know, Miles Upshur was a regular guy. He had no affiliation with Murkoff. So in this scenario, you are yourself. Now, you would be safe from the experiments since you arrive after the initial outbreak, and the variants just have control of the asylum. So honestly, if you were to go there, you would definitely need a gun or some way to defend yourself. You're not going to be a total tough guy like Miles Upshur or Wayland Park, who somehow had the fortitude and dexterity to outrun his enemies and be mentally stable. And with people like Chris Walker patrolling to make sure no suitable host for the Walriders in the asylum, you would find yourself separated from your head if you were to enter the asylum. The variants would be pursuing you, either wanting to hurt you for fun or because they're scared. Either way, you would never survive the variants as yourself unless you're some Rambo-like character. So overall, I'd say you would never survive the Mount Massive Asylum unless you're with Murkoff Tactical and you can dispatch variants and safely keep your distance from the Walrider. You have a chance of surviving, but if you're trapped in the hell like that, you would find yourself to be a mutilated, bloody piece of flesh on the floor. Alright, so let's switch gears to Outlast 2. Now, this game was noticeably a downgrade from the first game and DLC. Outlast 2 takes place in a huge village. Instead of the game's setting being indoors, it is now outdoors. The whole game consists of 3 main antagonists. The cultist faction led by Papa Noth, a sadistic religious overweight priest, whose sole mission is to murder the offspring of villagers because they believed the Antichrist was among them. The second faction is the Scald, which is a second part of the cultists. They are led by Nick and Laird. Laird is a minuscule man sitting on top of a huge ogre-like being named Nick. They are living in a sick camp below the cultists. Papa Noth convinced everyone in that faction that they were suffering from a spiritual sickness. Whenever Nick and Laird discover a healthy human that stumbles upon their camp, they crucify this person as they believe this person is their prophet. It is unknown how many people they have killed. The final faction is the Heretics, led by Val, a trans male-to-female psychopath. By the way, correct me if I'm wrong. Don't cancel me if it's trans male-to-male. If she's trans male-to-female. Anyways, she wants the Antichrist to be born, and throughout the game you encounter her a couple times. The first time she kind of forced herself upon Blake. The second time she chases you through the mines, and the third time she rapes the protagonist, Blake. In the game, you are Blake Langerman, a cameraman with a dark and grisly past. In the beginning, you are in a helicopter and you crash into the village, but not exactly in the village. He makes his way to the village, and the events of Outlast 2 unfold there. The game wasn't too bad, but the ending was absolutely horrible and felt very unrewarding, as it really just made no sense at all. Throughout the game, Blake is haunted by nightmares of his past in school. This is likely because of the side effect of the Murkoff Experiments that were taking place in the village. The Murkoff Experiments are pretty unknown, though. We know that these flashes of light occur in the game are the experiment, and they cause people to be living some kind of hell in their head. The Outlast 2 comic confirms that the village was another experiment. We also learned that, by the way, spoilers alert, because if you haven't finished the game or read the comic yet, that Blake Langerman survived the events of Outlast 2 but was in an unresponsive state due to the flashbacks of, like his past and the nightmares. The Pauls, which is Paulette and Paul, who also work with Murkoff, they told the Murkoff doctors to check to see what's going on in his head in a nearby facility. So in general, Blake has been taken by Murkoff and he will likely be imprisoned for life or experimented on. Unless in Outlast 3 it picks up where Outlast 2 is left off. Anyways, that's the overall story of Outlast 2. Now let's get into why you wouldn't survive the cultists or the experiments that went on. The cultists are violent people working for Noth. Some are not overly strong like Chris Walker or other variants from the first game, but the villagers are armed with knives and other weaponry. The villagers are persistent and ruthless. One example of someone that would kill you in a heartbeat would be Corgan, a very minor antagonist in the game. You only see him like once, I believe. Blake stumbles upon his house after waking up from a nightmare, and you see dozens of mutilated bodies. It's easy to tell that Corgan is someone that would definitely slice you up in a heartbeat. The cultists will chase you by any means necessary if Noth tells them to. You're not going to survive the cultists unless you're somehow able to evade a huge number of people and keep your head together. There's also Marta, the main antagonist. Marta is the most violent cultist of the bunch. She has a special relationship with Noth. Marta will pursue you relentlessly and use her pickaxe to chop off your nuts, as seen from her kill animations. The Scald are desperate people. They would either kill you because they think your flesh will help them cure their sickness, or worse, they will abduct you and crucify you as they did to Blake in the game. So overall, if you were to stumble upon their encampment, you would suffer a fate way worse than death. So now we reach the heretics. The heretics are ruthless and sadistic people. As I said earlier about Val, who led the heretics, she is a violent individual. She rapes the protagonist and uses him in a ritual. The heretics are feral people, meaning that they've lost almost all of their humanity and cannot be reasoned with, although they are somewhat civilized since they follow Val. The heretics even burn their victims alive or mutilate their bodies when they're alive. If any human being were to find themselves in a mine with heretics around every corner, you would be taken and die a slow and painful death. Overall, there would be no way to survive Murkoff's experiments with variants and such. In Outlast 2, with constant mysterious flashes that can mess with your human mind, your sanity would be crushed before anyone kills you. And remember, with the other people roaming around, it would be impossible for any human being to survive. Anyways, that's all for now, folks. This video was fairly short, but we didn't want to keep you guys waiting for another video, for like a while. We have another video that's yet to be finished. We have one reviewing the Dead by Daylight fan chapters that were made, and the Alien Isolation review. But anyways, we'll see you guys next time. So, bye-bye.